I do have to say that when I co-founded the Libertine Party of Georgia, I was 5 years old. just wanted to. How many of you here have seen the Christmas season movie, It's a Wonderful Life? And how many people here found it moving or inspiring or uplifting when you saw it? Okay. All right. Now, before I get started on this, I must say that I'm sure that there are a few people here who didn't like that movie. Is there anyone here who doesn't like it? Okay. All right. There are certainly arguments from a pro-individualist point of view that there are some problems maybe with the movie. And believe me, I can understand that because I have a daughter named Dagny. Okay, so you can know that I can understand, but I ask you to just bear with me, okay? Because what I want to say is that you may be surprised that this movie has some very, very good messages for life and also for the future of liberty. Let me set the stage here. It's Christmas Eve, 1946, in Bedford Falls. And we see our hero, George Bailey, greatly played by the wonderful actor Jimmy Stewart, okay? And he's standing on a bridge above icy water. And he's trying to decide whether he's going to jump in. Because you see, George Bailey has a $15,000 insurance policy, life insurance policy. And he kind of figures that he's worth more dead than alive. What he doesn't know is that there are angels in heaven looking down on this scene. There are two long-time angels, and then there's an angel in training named Clarence, and they're telling him about George Bailey's life. So they start looking over what happened in George Bailey's life, and they see a lot of interesting things. Just a couple of examples is when George was 12 years old, his brother Harry fell into an icy pond and was drowning. And George Bailey rescued his brother and saved his life. Then they find that years later, George was working at a pharmacy. And the pharmacist was very upset and despondent because he had lost his son. And he was so sad and distracted that he accidentally put poison in a prescription. George Bailey was there to notice when it happened, and he made sure that it got corrected. Lots of other little things we notice about George Bailey's life as we go along. But we fast forward a little bit. Again and again, we see that George Bailey was always helping people. George Bailey did what he considered the right thing to do, and he always just instinctively did it. Again and again. World War II breaks out, and we see that he can't go because he lost the hearing in one of his ears when he rescued his brother when he was age 12, and they wouldn't let him in the service. But his brother Harry went, and his brother Harry became a naval pilot who shot down 2 enemy planes in World War II. And the enemy planes were just about to attack a U.S. troop ship, and he shot them down. And we fast forward into George Bailey's life, and we see that a whole series of events happens. Crises occur, calamities occur, and George starts getting very discouraged, and he starts getting depressed. And he just thinks that his life has not made any difference. And so what he does is he leaves his house. He goes to a bar, he gets drunk, he drives along and runs his car into a tree. He gets out of the car, walks over kind of in a drunken stupor, and is standing on the bridge trying to decide whether to jump in. All of a sudden, Clarence comes along, our would-be angel comes along, and he jumps into the river and is pretending to drown. And what do you think George Bailey does? Of course, he jumps in to save Clarence. Now, what he does, this is when he finds out, because Clarence tells him, you know what, I'm your guardian angel, and I'm here to help you, and I'm going to show you how you make a difference in the world. Well, of course, George Bailey doesn't believe this, and so he tells him not only does he want to die, but George Bailey wishes that he had never been born. That's when Clarence starts showing George some of the things that would have happened, or would have been, and how life would have been in his small town if George Bailey had indeed never been born. The pharmacist we talked about, he's in prison now because he poisoned a child. His life is ruined and the child's life is ruined. We look at, of course, Harry, his brother, is dead because he didn't rescue him from the frozen pond. But not only is Harry dead, hundreds of U.S. soldiers are dead because he didn't shoot down the plane that was about to attack the ship. For the first time in his life, George Bailey discovers and sees clearly what difference for good he has been in his life, how he has made a difference in his small town. And so he goes back home to a great celebration. All of his family and friends are glad to have him back, and he realizes that it's a wonderful life. And then they hear a little bell ring. And his daughter says, "Daddy, that means an angel has gotten its wings." And so Clarence has become a full-fledged angel. And George Bailey realizes that it is indeed a wonderful life. Now, what if this movie holds some special message for us in our life and for the future of life? The movie demonstrates how small things can create big results. How unnoticed things can create very noticeable consequences, and how forgotten events can create unforgettable results. It's very true in life, and it's very true in the libertarian movement. That's why I say it's a wonderful liberty. Let's look at some George Baileys in the libertarian movement. Let's start with Ayn Rand, who actually launched the modern libertarian movement by writing the book Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. These novels did more than just engage their readers. It made them think. It woke them up and made them think. And, as Oliver Wendell Holmes said, man's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never goes back to the old dimensions. And that's what Atlas Shrugged, Fountainhead, and lots of other writings by Ayn Rand did. But not only did it actually did something even more stunning, because her writings dramatically influenced the individuals who actively built the modern libertarian movement. David F. Nolan, Harry Brown, Robert Poole, Ed Crane, and thousands of other libertarians cite Ayn Rand as their first influence. Ayn Rand was not simply a George Bailey. She created other George Baileys who made a difference in the libertarian movement. Her work gave birth to the George Baileys of the libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party. Now let's ask the George Bailey question about Ayn Rand. What if Ayn Rand had never been born? What if she had not written The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged? Where would we be today? Would we have a smaller libertarian movement? Would we even have a libertarian movement at all if Ayn Rand did not be there in there? Clearly, Ayn Rand's life was a wonderful liberty. Now let's think about three other individuals, Robert Poole, Manny Klausner, and Tibor Machan. I don't know if you've heard of all of them. Some of you new people may not have heard of them. But what they did was they bought a little mimeographed freedom newsletter, and they turned it into Reason Magazine. Now in the early 70s, Reason Magazine was the publication that spread libertarian ideas. They were the glue that held together the early fledgling libertarian movement. They reported on the launch and the progress of the Libertarian Party during that time. They also reported on the first presidential campaign that the Libertarian Party had with Dr. John Hosford. And they published his great book called Libertarianism. Now what if Reason Magazine had never been born? What if they decided the Libertarian Party was a stupid idea and they weren't going to even cover it at all when it first came out? What if? But would the libertarian movement be as big as it is now if Reason Magazine had not been born? Because of Robert Poole and Reason, it's a wonderful liberty. How about David F. Nolan, the founder of the Libertarian Party? Now, David F. Nolan was a volunteer for the Goldwater campaign for the Republican Party in 1964. He had been a libertarian activist in the Republican Party for some time, but he was getting a little tired of the big government approach that the Republican Party was having. And then, on that fateful day, August 15, 1971, Republican President Richard Nixon imposed wage price controls. Now, a lot of Republicans praised Nixon for doing this, said it was a great idea. A lot of other Republicans just kind of remained silent. But for Dave Nolan, it was the last straw. He was sick of this. So what he did was, that same month, he published an article called "The Case for a Libertarian Political Party." And for 4 months, he contacted, no email then now, remember, but he wrote and telephoned libertarians all over the place that he could think of and asked them to join him in founding a new political party. And so, on December 11th, 1971, they all met in Dave Nolan's living room, and they started the Libertarian Party. Now, the Libertarian Party, candidates from then have exposed tens of millions of people to the ideas of liberty. For 40 years, the Libertarian Party has been out there educating, recruiting, and activating people to work for liberty. In my opinion, in fact, the Libertarian Party is the most successful party in the last 50 years, because the Libertarian Party has succeeded in getting the word libertarian and the ideas of libertarianism out there as the center of political debate in America. Now let's ask the George Bailey question about David F. Nolan. What if Dave had never been born? What if he had just decided that, oh, wage price controls, no big deal? Or what if he had gotten so disgusted that he just dropped out of politics altogether? Would we even have a Libertarian Party now? Or would it maybe just be starting now? Would it be a lot smaller than it is now if David had not been there? But thanks to David Nolan, it's a wonderful liberty. Let's consider a gentleman named Marshall Fritz. And Marshall Fritz was involved in the Libertarian Party. In fact, he was the executive director of the California Libertarian Party. And then in 1985, he decided to start the Advocates for Self-Government. And what he wanted to do was to help share with libertarians ideas of how to be more effective and get more people to come into the libertarian movement. Marshall Fritz rediscovered a little article written by David Nolan in which he had a picture of the Nolan chart. And the Nolan chart helped people see that there was more than just a left-right line to the political spectrum. And Marshall rediscovered that and thought it was a wonderful thing, but then he started thinking, well, how can people just see where they fit on that political spectrum? And so in the middle of the night, he had this insight and invented the world's smallest political quiz. Questions that people could answer and place themselves on that new political map that you see on the world's smallest political quiz now. And this magnificent and magical tool has become the single most powerful thing to help create and discover new libertarianism. It's been taken over 18 million times online. Millions of copies of the cards have been distributed. It's featured in major textbooks. And teachers and professors are using it in the classroom all over the country to open people's eyes to this new political map. Now, why is the quiz so powerful? Well, as Oliver Wendell Holmes said, man's mind, once stretched to a new idea, never comes back to the old dimension. Ask the George Bailey question about Marshall Fritz. What if Marshall Fritz had never been born? What if he hadn't started the Advocates for Self-Government? What if he had never invented the world's smallest political quiz? How big a hole would that have left in the libertarian movement? Because of Marshall Fritz, it's a wonderful liberty. There are many, many more George Baileys. You can find George Bailey stories in the founding of Cato, about Harry Brown, about many leaders in the National Libertarian Party. And I bet a lot of you could tell me George Bailey stories about people in the Libertarian Party of Indiana. Many of these of us have had George Bailey moments, Or we've created George Bailey effects, in fact. When you drop a stone in the water, the ripples flow. And sometimes we create unexpected ripples that go farther than we can ever imagine. Now, these stories that I've been telling you about libertarians are about big things. You know, the founding of the Libertarian Party, the invention of the world's smallest political quiz, Reason Magazine, all of these big things. But you may be thinking, I could never do one of those big things. I mean, I'm too shy, or I'm too busy, or I'm not creative enough to do these big things. But I'm telling you that just by being here this weekend, you are a George Bailey for liberty. Just by what you're doing in the Indiana Party makes you a George Bailey for liberty. Sometimes we're George Baileys, and then sometimes we're Clarence the Angel. We can tell other libertarians and remind them of what they have done for the liberty movement. Today, I want to be your Clarence. I mean, I'm sort of an angel, right? Do you ever get discouraged when you're working for liberty and think, gosh, what I'm doing is just not making a difference? Do you ever feel that way sometimes? Does anybody ever feel a little discouraged sometimes? Well, if you're thinking about jumping into an icy river, well, let's see, it's springtime. I guess maybe there's not many icy rivers around right now. But seriously, we do kill a little bit of ourselves every time we give up, every time we decide not to do something for liberty, because we think it might not make a difference, or it might not do any good. Let me be your Clarence today. How many of you here have ever had a letter to the editor printed about libertarianism? How many of you have ever run for office? How many of you have helped someone else run for office? All right. How many of you have ever participated in an OPH booth or given out quizzes to people? All right. You may be too shy to run for office, but a candidate needs a website that you can design. You may be able to greet people at a meeting and make newcomers feel welcome. There's a letter to the editor that needs to be written that you can write. My organization, the Advocates for Self-Government, has tons of techniques and tips designed to help you be more effective in your outreach and better at your communication to bring more people into liberty. Now, if you use just one of those tips, you could be the George Bailey that brings in the next Harry Brown, the next David Nolan, into the liberty movement, just by using one of those. Seemingly small things, but small things can produce large results. Unnoticed things can produce major noticeable consequences, and forgotten events can bring about unforgettable results. If you ever doubt that there's value to what you're doing for liberty, remember that you may be causing a George Bailey effect. If you see another libertarian who's down and thinking, I'm just not getting anywhere, I just think I'm going to give up all of this, you can be their Clarence. You can be an angel. You can ask him the George Bailey question. Let's look, what would have happened if you had not been here? What if you, one person, was not here? And just how important is this difference that you're making in the work that you're doing? Just how important is it? Well, actually, we're involved in the great cause that makes all other causes possible. Think about it. The history of mankind, the progress of mankind, has to do with individual liberty becoming more prominent. The more individual liberty there's been, the greater progress for mankind. The more liberty there is, the better off everyone is. In fact, when you look around the world, where liberty is lacking, you see poverty and illness and unhappiness and violence. Where there is liberty, you see abundance and harmony and happiness. In many cases, it's the difference between life and death. George Bailey learned to his great surprise that he had made a huge difference for good in the world in his small little town. But libertarian George Baileys, every one of you here in this room, you are saving millions of people. You're making a difference not just in a small town, but in the entire world. Libertarians indeed are involved in the great cause that makes all causes possible. In fact, I would say that we are the current anti-slavery movement. And how important is that? The tiny bell that rang for George Bailey was telling him that an angel had been born, okay? But the tiny bell that we libertarians hear is the Liberty Bell. And all the work that you do every day, big and small, whatever you do for liberty, you're keeping that Liberty Bell strong and ringing loudly. Through your daily activities, you make it a wonderful life and a wonderful liberty. And I thank you for doing that. He said I could give a plug for the Advocate, so I never turn down that opportunity. How many people here have never heard of the Advocates for Self-Government? There's somebody? Okay. All right, good. Come see me after the speech. I'll tell you all about it. But the Advocates for Self-Government has been around since 1985. As I said, that Marshall Fritz founded in 1985. And what we provide for you is the absolute best outreach tools that you can get to help bring in more libertarians. What we want is more libertarians. We want this world to be filled with libertarians. And so we provide the world's smallest political quiz, Operation Politically Homeless, and tips on communication and training on communication where you can learn to be a better advocate for libertarian ideas. So we are open to helping you in any way that we can. We have a website, theadvocates.org, that you can easily find. The quiz is there. You can send people to the quiz to take it. We also have an introductory website called libertarianism.com, which has a lot of introductory material that you can send your friends to learn more about what is libertarianism and what are our positions on issues and so forth. So we provide all of those things for you. We provide trainings. If you ever have any group meeting that you would like to have a training to learn how to be more effective communicating liberty, we would be glad to come and do that for you. So we welcome you to use our tools. That's what we're here for, is to help you do your job even better. So thank you again.
And Sharon, how are you today?
We're funded solely by donations from individuals. So we're a nonprofit. We're tax deductible, so anyone who gives to us can deduct it from their taxes. Keep a little bit of the money away from the government. So that's how we're funded, and so we welcome, of course, anyone who is able to help us with that mission. We really appreciate it. So thank you for inviting me.